So, the topic that we choose, which is inflation. So, to simplify it, the definition of inflation is, remember the keywords, general increase in prices over time. Okay? General increases in prices over time, which leading to a decreasing in the purchasing power of money. It means that the same amount of money buys fewer goods and services than before. So that will be the definition of inflation. All right, so the country that we've picked is basically Sudan. So before we say what does Sudan has to do with inflation, let me give you an introduction based on the country that we choose, which is Sudan. So just a short overview for Sudan. So let's jump straight into it. Sudan is a country located in the northeastern Africa. It is the third largest country on the continent, bordered by Egypt to the north, the Red Sea to the northeast, Eritrea and Ethiopia to the east, South Sudan to the south, the Central African Republic to the southwest, Chad to the west, and Libya to the northwest. That is a lot of info regarding about Sudan. So, with the population of over 45.7 million people, Sudan is ethnically diverse with Arab, Nubian, Beja, and various African groups making up the majority. So, Arabic is officially language, while English is widely spoken. The capital city is Khartoum, sorry if I mispronounce it, located at the confluence of the White Nile and the Blue Nile rivers. So let's talk about the economy. So the country's economy relies heavily on agricultures, sorry, with crops like cotton, sorghum, and sesame being major exports. Sudan also has significant mineral resources, including oil, gold, and uranium. So that is all for the overview based on Sudan.
Now I'm going to talk about inflation in Sudan. Sudan, a country grappling with economic complexities and structural issues, has been plagued by persistent inflation, posing a significant challenge. Over the years, high inflation rates have taken a toll on the economy and the livelihoods of its people. This inflationary trend, characterized by a sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services, has a multitude of causes in Sudan. Factors such as fiscal mismanagement, budget deficits, inadequate monetary policies, and external shocks have all contributed to the escalating prices. Consequently, the purchasing power of individuals has been eroded, impeding economic development. As policymakers and stakeholders seek to address this issue, it becomes crucial to comprehend the dynamics of inflation in Sudan. By implementing effective measures to curb inflationary pressures, stabilize prices, and foster sustainable economic growth, Sudan can hope for a brighter future for its people and the nation as a whole.
All right, so we jump straight into the next part, which is the issues related to inflations. So, there are several factors which influence inflations to happen, and one of those are demand push. Demand push. An article I choose for this topic is titled Modeling the Determinant of Inflation in Sudan, which was written by, let me get this right, Al-Mahdi At-Takhir, and was published on the 27th April of 2020. So, consumptions, investments, and government spending make up the total demand. So, when the overall amount of demand for goods and service rises to the point where it surpasses the whole amount of supplies. So that is what the definition of demand push. So, prices for many goods and services are compelled to rise due to the due to the excessive demand, which pulls the inflation upwards. So, let me just recap it back. So to say this, if the demand is far greater than supplies, so that is scarcity, correct? So if demands increases, just so, but not the supplies, while if demand increases, then inflation will increases as well. So the inflation rate increases in direct proportions to the size of discrepancy between total demand and total supplies. The larger the gap between aggregate demand and aggregate supply, the more rapid is the inflation. This rapid rise in inflation during times of success is first caused by unbalanced sections, branches, and different economic resources that are accounted for by the inherent characteristics of market based disciplines. Okay, so right after the demand pull, now we have cost push. So the article I use is the same as the previous article, so I don't need to repeat the details. Let's say first we can see why do I choose cost push? Because cost push is mostly, how do you say this, frequently mentioned whenever an inflation happens. So it's basically like a very popular topic to mention whenever an inflation happens. So let me give you a little bit of definition of cost push. It is brought on by profit margin expansion by businesses and union enforced wage hikes. So a little history of this cost push. Well, the sort of inflation has existed for a while and was even observed during the medieval era. However, it was examined as the primary source of inflation in the 1950s and again in the 1970s. The primary factor of driven cost push inflation is the growth in money salaries that is more fast than the rate of increase on labor productivity. So which is, you can see here, it's just the same as the demands and supplies, but but different elements. But for this one, you can see that the money salaries are far greater than labor productivity. So it almost have that same connection between demand pull, but it has its own elements and something something. So let's continue. The cost of producing goods rises as a result of the labor unions' intense pressure on companies to raise wage significantly. In response, businesses increase the cost of their goods. Despite increased costs, increasing income allow employees to purchase the same amount of goods as previously. Conversely, the rise in price prompts unions to call for even greater play. That's all for me.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Amir Hafi bin Amin Suhaimi, and I'll be presenting the third and fourth issue regarding Sudan's inflation. The third issue, which is rising food and drink prices. Today, I will discuss the severe impact on Sudan's economy from a combination of factors. Rising inflation reaching 64.3% on January, driven by increasing prices of food and beverages alongside a thriving black market for US dollars, has been a major concern. Shortages of subsidized bread and fuel, coupled with price hikes, led to protests and the removal of the former president Omar al-Bashir in 2019. The transitional authorities now face the challenge of reviving an economy damaged by decades of mismanagement. Additionally, Sudan suffered a significant blow when Sudan seceded in 2011, resulting in a loss of three-quarters of its oil output. To overcome these challenges, comprehensive economic reforms, foreign investment, political stability, and effective policies are necessary to stabilize prices and alleviate shortages. So the next issue is budget deficit. In Sudan, one of the main causes of inflation stems from the country's budget deficit and its reliance on borrowing from the banking system to bridge the gap. This strategy, known as deficit financing, has been pursued without fully considering its negative impact on the economy. By resorting to deficit financing, the government injects more money into the economy, which can increase overall demand. However, if the supply of goods and services does not match this heightened demand, prices can rise, leading to inflation. While deficit financing may provide temporary relief, the failure to account for its adverse consequences can worsen inflationary pressures and impede long-term economic stability.
Assalamualaikum, and my name is Muhammad Naif Firdaus. I'm going to talk about the first impact of inflation on Sudan. So the first impact is about monetary policies. So what is monetary policies? Monetary policy is the macroeconomic policy laid down by the central bank. It involves management of money supply and interest rate, and is the demand side econo- economic policy used by the government of a country to achieve macroeconomic objectives like inflation, consumption, growth, and liquidity. So what kind of things that is going on in Sudan about monetary policies? So, according to a study found that the money supply, exchange rate, the GDP, the budget deficit, and government spending all suffered from Sudan's inflation. The results show how Sudan's inflation is being impacted simultaneously by the money supply, budget deficit, and shrinking gross domestic product. So all of these are the impact of inflation on Sudan based on monetary policies. I'm going to talk about the second impact of inflation on Sudan. The second impact of inflation on Sudan is household livelihoods. In this case, what it means by household livelihoods is the cost of living. The cost of living kept increasing in Sudan. According to according to difference analysis, it is revealed that between 2015 and 2017, inflation significantly worsened urban poverty, particularly as a result of increase in non-food prices. This also give an impact on food prices. While proximity to school is particularly crucial for girls' school attendance, food price inflation has negative and statistically significant impacts on girls' primary and secondary school attendance. Other than that, increase in food prices led to a declining in labor force participation and increasing unemployment among urban residents.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Hanif Ikmal bin Maksyar and I will present about the third and fourth impact of inflation to Sudan. The third impact of inflation is decreasing purchasing power. As the inflation rate of Sudan increased in 2021, the ability of the government and private sector to import essential requirements was significantly reduced because of depreciation of the Sudanese pound. Most of non-cereal food item prices has increased in around 20 to 40% between January and February that year. The rapid depreciation has resulted in a 60 to 85% drop in household purchasing power, particularly among the urban poor households. These urban households are increasing their dependency on support from relatives, extended families, while also engaging in coping on how to decrease their problems in crisis situation. It is clear that Sudan purchasing power has been severely affected as households struggle to meet their basic needs, and face growing financial difficulties. For the last impact of inflation to Sudan in our presentation is unemployment. Sudan is one country that has a lack of decent work opportunities. In Sudan, only 12% of all jobs meet the criteria for decent work set by the International Labour Organization (ILO). Many employees receive wages below the poverty line, and there is also a significant gap between gender for wages, with women earning lower wages than men. As you can see in the table, it is said that 29.5% of all employees in Sudan receive wages below the poverty line, and a 40% gap between gender. This huge gender income difference was more or less constant across urban and rural areas, even though the average monthly wages of women in rural areas was slightly below the monthly minimum wages. Only one in every three working ages women are either employed or actively seeking employment, compared to 3 in 4 men. One of the way of solution of inflation in Sudan. Sudan could use their fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the use of government spending and taxation to influence the economy. Governments typically use fiscal policy to promote strong and sustainable growth to reduce poverty. The role and objectives of fiscal policy is to gain prominence during the recent global economic crisis. The central banks indirectly target activity by influencing the money supply through adjustments to interest rate, bank reserve requirements, and also the purchase and sale of government securities and foreign exchange. Government influence the economy by changing the level and types of taxes, the extent and composition of spending, and also the degree and form of borrowing.
I'm going to talk about the second solution of impact. The second solution of impact is that government needs to use monetary policy. The goal of monetary policy is to achieve price stability and encourage sustainable economic growth. The government, central bank, implements the policy to use monetary instruments to achieve its goals. There are two types of monetary policy, and they are contractionary monetary policy and expansionary monetary policy. In this case, the government need to use contractionary monetary policy. Contractionary monetary policy is used to cure inflation. To achieve this, Sudan will need to raise the bank rate, sell government securities in open market, and increase the requirement reserve ration. So by doing this, the government can cure the inflation step by step.